Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be looking at mutual funds in India, and we're going to kind of trace their path from the very beginning all the way to their ambitions for 2047. We've got some great research from PwC and AMFI.
What's fascinating is how the story of mutual funds in India really mirrors India's economic journey. It all started with just one product in an economy that was mostly agrarian at that time.
Really? Just one product. That's amazing to think about, given just how big the industry is today.
I know, right? Back in 1963, most people didn't even know what a mutual fund was. But now, we're talking about an industry that manages trillions of rupees. It's a testament to just how far India's economy has come.
Yeah, quite a transformation.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it wasn't easy. There must have been some challenges along the way.
Right. For sure. Just think about the variety of investors out there. You've got your casual investors, maybe they're a little scared of the markets going up and down. Then you've got your informed investors who might have had some trouble finding good advice. And then, of course, there are a lot of people who just don't know much about finance at all.
So how did this industry grow in such a complex landscape? We're talking about going from 47,000 crore rupees under management in 1995 to trillions today. What were the big turning points?
Well, we're going to need to kind of break the journey down into phases. Each phase had its own challenges and breakthroughs that really made the industry what it is today.
Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning. Can you give us a sense of what India was like in 1964 when that very first mutual fund was introduced?
Picture this. India in 1964. Back then, most people just put their money in banks. That was basically how everyone saved. But the problem was inflation was slowly eating away at their savings. So that's where the first mutual fund, US 64, comes in. It offered a way for people to grow their money faster than inflation could eat it away.
I bet it wasn't an overnight success, though.
Not at all. Growth was pretty slow in those early years. People were used to just putting their money in the bank, nice and safe. They weren't quite ready to jump into the market. And then, mutual funds were really only available in cities.
So when did things start to pick up speed? When did the industry start to gain some real momentum?
The 90s were a game changer. India opened up its economy, and that meant private companies could start offering mutual funds. More competition, more innovation, and most importantly, more choices for investors.
Yeah, the winds of change. And wasn't this also when those SIPs, those systematic investment plans, came onto the scene?
Exactly. SIPs made investing so much easier, especially for people who didn't have a lot of money to invest all at once. It's like this. Instead of trying to save a huge chunk of money, you just invest a little bit every month, maybe like 500 rupees.
Okay, so it's like putting money aside regularly, but for investments.
Exactly. And the great thing about SIPs is that they help you deal with all the ups and downs of the market. You don't have to worry about timing it perfectly. You're just consistently investing no matter what the market's doing.
It takes the pressure off. I get it.
Right.
But I imagine that regulations also played a big part in making the industry more trustworthy.
Absolutely. In 1992, SEBI, that's the regulatory body, got more power to oversee the market, making sure things were transparent and fair. Then in 1995, AMFI, the industry association, was established, which helped protect investors even more. All these steps were so important for the industry to grow.
So with regulations in place and SIPs making investing easier, the industry was really set up for growth. And did we actually see that happen? Did the numbers reflect those changes?
Oh, yeah, they did. By 1995, assets under management had jumped to 47,000 crore rupees. That's huge compared to just a few years earlier. It was clear. Mutual funds were starting to catch on.
Pretty impressive growth. But I remember reading that financial literacy was still a major hurdle back then. A lot of people just didn't really get it.
Yeah, you're right. Even though the industry was making progress, there was still a lot of work to do to educate people about mutual funds. Why were they good? How did they work? A lot of people were hesitant to invest because they were just unfamiliar with the whole thing.
So this first phase was about getting the basics right, creating a solid regulatory framework, bringing in innovative products like SIPs, and really starting to tackle that lack of financial literacy. It was about setting the stage for what was to come.
Right. It was all about building that solid foundation.
And that foundation would prove to be incredibly important as the industry entered its next phase of growth.
Yeah, definitely.
A phase marked by explosive growth and a wave of new investors.
You got it.
So stay tuned, because when we come back, we'll be diving into that exciting period from 2015 to 2024 when the mutual fund industry in India really started to take off.
It's going to be a fascinating journey, so stick with us.
Yeah. We're back on the deep dive. And before the break, we were talking about the early years of mutual funds in India. All those first steps that really set the stage. Now let's fast forward to the period from 2015 to 2024. So what happened during these years that led to this massive growth?
Well, I think this phase is really all about making mutual funds accessible to everyone, kind of like democratizing the whole investing world. It was a shift from serving just a select few to opening it up to a much bigger
I
audience.
like that. Democratization. So how did that actually work in real life?
Imagine a world where investing wasn't only for the rich or, people who are super knowledgeable about finance. Think about like a young professional just starting out or maybe a small business owner trying to build up their savings. During this time, these everyday people really became the driving force behind the mutual fund industry.
It's like empowering people from all walks of life to participate in the markets.
Yeah.
But what were the specific factors that led to this surge in retail participation?
Well, first of all, the stock market was doing pretty well. People were seeing that their money could grow faster in the market than, just sitting in a savings account. And remember those SIPs we talked about? Well, they really took off during this time. They made investing much less intimidating and more manageable.
SIPs, those small regular investments, they really seem to have played a key role. Were there any specific campaigns that contributed to that popularity?
Oh, yeah. AMFI, the industry body, they launched this huge campaign called Mutualfundsahihai. I'm sure you've heard of it. It was everywhere on TV, on radio, online. They just made investing in mutual funds seem so easy and relatable, emphasizing how SIPs could help people achieve their long-term financial goals.
Oh yeah, I definitely remember those ads.
Yeah.
Catchy. But did they really work? Did they actually change people's perception?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the campaign reached millions and millions of Indians. It was a big factor in the industry's growth. People started seeing mutual funds as a legitimate way to grow their savings, and SIPs just became like the go-to option.
Wow, that's impressive. But it wasn't just about catchy slogans, right? What about the investors who are looking for more personalized advice?
Yeah, you're right. That's where those registered investment advisors, or RIAs, came in. These are professionals who can create an investment plan that's tailored to your specific needs and goals.
It's like having a personal financial coach.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes sense. But what about the people who were more DIY investors? The ones who wanted to manage their own investments. Were there any options for them?
Yeah, for sure. During this period, direct plans became really popular. With direct plans, investors can invest directly in mutual funds, which means they cut out the middleman and save on fees.
So more control and lower costs.
Got it. And what about people who are looking for like a simple and efficient way to track the market?
That's where passive funds like index funds really started to shine. These funds are designed to match the performance of a specific market index, so you basically get broad market exposure without having to pick individual stocks. Okay, so there were a ton of new options coming out catering to different needs and preferences, but I'm guessing technology also had a huge impact on this phase of growth.
Oh, absolutely. This is when we saw digital platforms completely change the investing game. Suddenly, you could invest in mutual funds from anywhere at any time with just a few taps on your phone.
Yeah, convenience and accessibility, it's credible. But with all these new platforms popping up, how did the industry ensure that investors were protected? Were there any regulatory changes during this time?
Yes, there were actually some pretty significant changes aimed at making the industry more transparent and user-friendly. One major change was the reclassification of mutual fund schemes in 2017.
Reclassification, that sounds a little technical. What exactly did that involve?
Well, before that, there were something like 2,000 different mutual fund schemes with a lot of overlap, which made things really confusing. So they streamlined everything into just 36 distinct categories. This made it so much easier for investors to understand and choose funds that aligned with their goals.
Got it. So less confusion and more clarity for investors.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What other changes were made?
Another big one was the capping of the total expense ratio, or TER, in 2018. This basically set a limit on how much mutual fund companies could charge in fees. This really benefited retail investors because it made investing more affordable.
So lower costs for investors. What else? Were there any other notable regulatory changes that impacted the industry?
Yeah, actually, ESG investing became a much bigger focus during this time. That's investing in companies that prioritize the environment, social issues, and good governance. So regulators introduced new rules that require mutual fund companies to be more transparent about their ESG practices. This was really important for the growing number of investors who wanted their money to be invested in a way that aligned with their values.
Investing with a conscience. It's amazing how much this industry evolved in just a decade. from becoming more accessible to focusing on transparency and even aligning with people's values. By the end of 2024, the mutual fund landscape looked completely different, much more inclusive and responsive to the needs of the average investor.
It's true. But getting more people to invest is only the first step. The real goal is to help people achieve true financial well-being.
Now, that's an interesting thought. We've been talking about growth and access, but what does financial well-being really mean, especially in the context of India? How do we move beyond just having investments to actually feeling secure and in control?
That's a great question, and one that we're going to dig into right after the break. We'll explore how financial well-being goes beyond just looking at your bank balance and gets into those feelings of empowerment, resilience, and having the freedom to make choices that align with what you want in life. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about this idea of financial well-being. It's something that really resonates, especially with so much financial uncertainty out there these days.
Absolutely. It goes beyond just having money. It's more about that sense of security, feeling resilient, being in control of your finances.
India is such a diverse country, though. Does financial well-being even mean the same thing for everyone?
That's a great point. There's no one-size-fits-all definition here. We have to get away from this idea of the average Indian investor and remember that India is made up of so many different communities, each with their own unique financial habits and outlooks.
It's like one nation, multiple financial mindsets,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Can you give us some examples of how these mindsets actually differ across the country?
Okay, let's start with the diamond merchants of Surat, specifically the Palampuri Jain community. They're known for their sharp business skills, but their approach to money is fascinating.
I've always been curious about how they manage their finances. Tell me more.
It's a really interesting mix of traditional wisdom and a very modern outlook. They're incredibly disciplined savers, often putting their profits right back into their businesses, but they're also not afraid to take risks, especially in the global markets. And they rely heavily on their community networks and the knowledge that's been passed down for generations to navigate those complex financial landscapes.
So, careful planning, but also calculated risk-taking, guided by strong community ties. That's a unique combination. Okay, let's switch gears completely. What about a community that's going through a major economic shift?
The Reddy community in Kadapa is a perfect example. They've traditionally been farmers, but now more and more of them are becoming entrepreneurs and looking for diverse ways to make money.
So, a move from farms to businesses. How is that affecting the way they handle their finances?
They're still big believers in tangible assets like land, property, and gold. But they're also starting to see education as really important for their children's future. So it's this interesting mix of traditional values and a growing awareness that they need to adapt to the changing economic climate.
It's amazing how cultural and historical contexts can influence financial decisions. Now let's go to a completely different part of India, Bastar. This region is famous for its tribal communities and their unique way of life.
The tribal communities of Bastar offer a whole different perspective on financial well-being. Their practices are deeply rooted in sustainability, community well-being, and resource sharing.
So their financial decisions are based on values that put collective good and environmental balance first?
Exactly. They tend to make decisions as a community, relying on their traditional knowledge and ecological wisdom. It challenges the way we usually think about financial security and shows that it can have very different meanings depending on your values.
It definitely makes you rethink what it means to be financially secure. Okay, for our last example, let's go to Meghalaya, home to the Khasi community who have a matrilineal system.
The Khasi community is really unique because women are the ones who manage finances and inherit property. It's a system where women are financially empowered and have a lot of control over their family's wealth.
That's a pretty stark contrast to a lot of other parts of India, where financial decisions are usually made by men. So we've talked about these different financial ecosystems, the diamond merchants in Surat, the Reddy community in Kadapa, the tribal communities of Bastar, and the Khasi community in Meghalaya. What does all this mean for the mutual fund industry? How can they create products and services that appeal to such a wide range of needs and preferences?
The key is to move away from a product-centric approach and really embrace an investor-centric one. We have to acknowledge that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution and instead develop strategies that are tailored to these different financial mindsets.
So personalized solutions, but how do you actually put that into practice?
Well, let's think about Ramesh again, that small business owner from before. He might be hesitant to invest in mutual funds because he doesn't really understand them, or maybe he doesn't trust financial institutions. Those are real concerns that we have to address.
Building trust is crucial then. How can we do that?
Instead of just relying on traditional advertising, why not partner with local influencers or community leaders who already have Ramesh's trust? Imagine a respected elder in his community explaining how mutual funds work in a way that he can understand and relate to.
That's a good idea. Tapping into existing social networks and community trust. What about the products themselves? How can you make them more appealing to someone like Ramesh?
Instead of just offering generic investment options, why not create products that align with his values? Like, imagine a mutual fund that focuses specifically on investing in local businesses or infrastructure projects that directly benefit his community.
I see. So investments that have a tangible impact and resonate with his sense of belonging. Now, what about Neha, our young professional? How can the industry cater to her needs?
Neha's tech-savvy and comfortable using digital platforms. For her, we need to create a smooth and personalized experience using technology. Think about a platform that gives her custom recommendations based on her financial goals, how much risk she's comfortable with, and even her interests.
Using technology to empower her to make her own decisions and reach her financial goals. It's incredible how we can personalize solutions to address such a wide range of needs. But this requires a big change in how the industry works, right?
Definitely. It's not just about offering new products. It's about building trust, explaining complex concepts in a way that's easy to understand, and making financial education more accessible and engaging.
So it's a multi-pronged approach. What role can AMFI play in making all this happen?
AMFI has a huge role as a catalyst and a facilitator. They need to keep raising awareness, but also advocate for investor-friendly policies and regulations. They can also help bring together asset management companies, distributors, and tech providers to build a more inclusive and responsive system.
It sounds like we're talking about a complete transformation of the industry towards a more human-centered approach. But what's the ultimate goal here? What will the mutual fund landscape look like in 2047 if we get all this right?
Imagine in India, where mutual funds aren't seen as something only certain people use, but as a key tool for financial empowerment for everyone. A country where financial well-being is a reality for millions of families. That's what we're working towards.
It's an inspiring vision, one that focuses on inclusivity, accessibility, and truly understanding the Indian investor. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, but it all comes down to this. What steps will you take to build your own path to financial well-being? Remember, the journey starts with a single step. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.